yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello and welcome to Jen Taylor Rerouting, where being rude is never acceptable, but sarcasm is welcome and swearing isn't always a bad option. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Jen Taylor Rerouting. This is like a super fun interview for me because I actually know the person that I'm talking to. Today I'm talking to Jonathan Fisher. Jonathan, tell me how you're doing today.
I'm doing fantastic today.
You're always doing fantastic. And Jonathan and I met at Sean Stevenson's conference in September of 2017. So like 9 months ago. And we sat next to each other at lunch.
We did.
And I heard some of your story. And for 9 months, I've been cyber stalking you to get you on. So thank you.
Yay, and here I am.
Your website is called Mythic Heart. And we were just laughing about how when people read it, it looks like My Thick Heart, but that's not spelled right.
No, yeah. Well, as I mentioned, it's like that's what my dad, he thought, I guess he was thinking he was being helpful. He's like, John, did you know that it actually says My Thick Heart? I'm like, it doesn't if you, if you spell it incorrectly, sure. But if you're putting that out, that's so very helpful. But you should know it's my Mythic Heart, not My Thick Heart, Dad.
Dad.
Yeah.
Tell me about your thick heart or mythic heart.
Right. Well, it's interesting because my heart literally probably is a bit thicker.
I was wondering that. That was going to be a question later, so we'll get to that. Yeah.
However, I thought up the name for the company for the website, Mythic Heart, because one, at the time when I was like creating this company, this S Corp, I'm like, well, obviously I have to think of a name. So I happened to be reading a Joseph Campbell book, which I'll probably reference later because I'm super into Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey stuff. And obviously if you know anything about him, his whole thing is mythology. And so I thought, well, mythic, okay, maybe I'll put something in there. And because I was born with heart issues, I thought, mythic heart, maybe I'll do that. And at the time, and still currently, I was connected to a company called Mindify, which produces hypnosis apps. So I do hypnosis, hypnotherapy, coaching, and I created these apps that are out there. I thought, well, mind, heart, mythic, Mindify, they both start with M. So there's this weird connection that I have to think of a name, go with Mythic Heart. So,
well, I love it. And it
incorrectly read it, it's Mythic Heart.
If you know how to spell, it's not my thick heart.
No, exactly.
So you do NLP, you're an NLP master practitioner and trainer, and a lot of people, like I didn't know what that was. And I started to share with you, I went through my first hypnotherapy session like 3 or 4 days ago.
I love that, yeah.
And I know for me, a fear with being hypnotized is that I'll be clucking like a chicken on stage and not remember, and people will be laughing at me. And the therapist will be like a puppet master, and I will have no control. It's hard to relinquish that, right? And it was described to me that when you're driving and you kind of space out, you're kind of in your own thoughts, just you're not totally subconscious maybe, and you're not dreaming, obviously, because you're driving, but like 50 miles goes by and you're like, oh my God, where did 50 miles go? And that trance-like state is closer to hypnotherapy. So you jump in and describe what you do and more about it.
Okay, well, I, like you, thought that at first because my first exposure to hypnosis, other than television and movies and whatever, was I've found out, like a lot of people, at a graduation party. So graduate from high school, we had our whole class got together when this hypnotist came in and hypnotized the audience and did all the things you think of in a hypnosis show. But then I talked to my best friend who was on stage and asked him a lot of questions. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. But then I went to college and I ended up majoring in psychology. Now, one of my professors, he was also a clinical psychologist. And he, after teaching us about hypnosis and the unconscious and subconscious and whatever, he hypnotized one of the clients in the class, or one of the students in the class. So we had to learn about it and then actually see someone hypnotized by the professor in a quasi-therapeutic setting. So I went with that notion of, oh, it's not just this weird thing that makes you do stuff. I then learned about it in college so that later, well, it was like 10 years later, 12 years later or so, when I actually went to a school, to the nation's only nationally accredited school for hypnotherapy, I didn't have that fear, that those the misguided thoughts, I guess, of what hypnosis was or what it could do or whatever. And so I was more open to it. But having said that, in every single session, including the first track in any app that I have, the hypnosis app, I talk about fears and misconceptions, because everybody has that experience of thinking they know what hypnosis is. And so like maybe they do, maybe they're on the same page, but I need them to be on the same page so that when I talk about what hypnosis is, when I say hypnotize or trance or whatever, I use those interchangeably, that we agree with what that is. So that unlike possibly what you had, I want them to know after that they were hypnotized. So I'll say things like, you can't be controlled in hypnosis. I can't make you do something that's against your morals, personality, ethics. I do talk about stage hypnosis and what that is, and that there is a performing aspect to it. Nobody on stage is doing anything that is against their morals in the moment when they're doing it, even though they may have some forgetting after. They're not doing anything that's so against who they are. They're sort of giving themselves permission, almost, although it's not exactly technically drunk, clearly, but it's almost as though it's like they let go of the inhibitions. Like, you know what? I'm not doing it. It's the hypnotist. It's the hypnosis that gives you permission to be goofy and silly and to get the audience to laugh. So they're not laughing at me. They're laughing at the act, at the situation, at what I'm being told, quote, forced to do. So there's a performance aspect. The hypnotist, at least for stage hypnosis, is doing things to pick out the most suggestible people in the audience. Everyone can be hypnotized, but some are just better candidates. We call them somnambulists, meaning a better explanation would be, or more accurate would be, they respond to all types of suggestions, literal and inferred.
Wow.
So they're just, in fact, I view somnambulists, I view people who are the most easily hypnotizable, or hypnotizable, I guess, as being almost like having a superpower. Because although everybody can be hypnotized, if somebody's really suggestible, they just respond so much better, so much quicker. And it's, frankly, as a hypnotist, it's more fun to work with them. But I go over the misconceptions, the fears that they can't get stuck, they can't be made to do anything, that what it may feel like, what it may not feel like, that even though hypnosis means sleep, it's for the hypnos, the god of sleep. They're not asleep. In fact, if they're asleep, I will wake them up. That has happened, clearly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, oh, raise your hand if you're hearing me. I talk about that some people feel lighter, some people feel heavier. You'll hear, not only will you hear everything I say, but you may hear more. You may hear like, oh, the air conditioning. Like I didn't notice that before. In some ways, you're more aware. Some people do have a kind of forgetting. And somnambulists, meaning the people that are most suggestible, tend to have more forgetting. Now, in the moment, they're aware of what was going on. But then later, they're like, wow, I don't exactly remember. A lot of that comes back. Everyone will have natural forgetting, but as natural as any conversation you ever have, you're not going to remember every single thing you said or they said. Natural forgetting.
And that's something that I told you. There was a way she phrased something I couldn't remember, but in the because do you do, my hypnotherapist sent me with like an 18-minute, it was like a 2-hour hypnosis session. The last 20 minutes was her recording herself so that I could listen to it on a daily basis. Is that something you do?
I don't do, well, here's what I've been doing, because now I used to be like labeled a hypnotherapist, and that's what I did. I mean, legally, I had to do that every time. If that's what I am, I hypnotize every time. Now that I'm labeling myself a coach, although I guess I use hypnotic ideas, or as we'll talk about, maybe NLP ideas in every single session one way or another, I don't formally do hypnosis every time anymore because I don't have to. Now I do, because I do my sessions, although that might change in the near future, I do my sessions on Zoom, like what we're on right now.
Right.
And so I record all the sessions.
Oh,
So if
okay.
it's a hypnosis thing, if they want the session, some people don't even want the recordings, but I have them should they want them, they could have it. Now, having said that, depending on what we're working on, I have to be careful in how I structure that hypnosis session because it may not be something they should listen to more than once. Because if we're releasing something, then let's say like quit smoking, a certain track shouldn't be listened to again because it's like you will quit smoking or you're now. It's like if they listen to it again, it presupposes they are smoking again.
All right.
You almost reinstall the problem to let go of the problem, or reinstall the fear if that's what we're working on to let go of the fear. So I have to be mindful of, is this a track that they might listen to again, and am I reinforcing the things that they don't want? So when I
Wow.
did the hypnosis apps, I had to construct literally every single track so that they could listen to it repeatedly and not reinstall the issue.
Exactly.
It
That
was,
I get.
yeah,
I totally get that. So who are the
yep.
people that you coach predominantly?
Well, when someone says, "So what do you do?" and if I just actually give them a title, I usually say health coach. Now we'll get into more of why I would say health coach in a bit when we talk about my story.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I currently really, I'm trying to think of, they're mostly like business things or personal things, habit stuff. Is it per se health? A little bit, like, but everything gets into something else because
Yeah.
somebody may come to me, let's say for quitting smoking or for health, and then we inevitably get into their business, into their personal life, into their relationships, into all the different areas of life because everything's connected
Yes.
clearly. So we get sidetracked deliberately so to fix these other areas because that's going to affect their health ultimately, or their health affects their business or whatever. So I do label as health coach, but really underneath all of it, going back to the mythic thing and the Joseph Campbell stuff, what really excites me is what excites you. What is your bliss? What is your passion? What is your purpose? Because when I'm talking to anyone, when I used to label myself a hypnotherapist, I thought that they were coming to me for this specific issue, like quitting smoking or losing weight or a fear of heights or whatever it is. And that's what I thought I was working on. I guess I still have to kind of work on that because that's why they're paying me. And yet I kind of almost laugh in the wonderful quality of humans in that it's all the same issue.
Yep.
Whatever the thing they think that the issue is, it's always the same.
Hmm.
It's just that's the symptom for you. The symptom for you is a health thing or a weight thing or a fear thing or a business thing or whatever it is. But I'm talking to their deeper self. I call it the core self or the higher self. That part of them that has the answer, that knows what they should do.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Okay, so it's more what I love about this type of therapy is that it does traditional therapy looks back where coaching looks forward.
Mm,
So you have kind of
yeah,
this has kind of a little bit of both. Like, well,
yeah,
where did this originate from? We're going backwards, and how do we take it and move it forward in a better way?
right.
And I think because I mean, I do everything naturally. I had babies at home with a midwife, like
Oh,
so
that's great.
I think everything is connected, right?
And there's an app for that because I created it. We did a hypnobirthing app actually.
Oh my God. I was
Yeah.
certified in two different birth, whatever. Now I can't even think of it, but I used to be a coach for people like a doula.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
I was certified in teaching two different types
So
of,
great. Yeah,
I know. See, we have to have more
yeah.
conversations.
Oh, we
So
could talk all over. Like, yeah, I mean, I created the thing for people. Either if they had a doula, the doula can use
yeah,
that as well. It's like it can be used whether you're doing an at-home water birth
did it.
or give me all the meds at the hospital. It doesn't matter. It's like you can use it for
Oh
anything.
my God. So you
Yeah.
created Mind Defy, the app.
I did not create it. Um interesting story. This is a whole other thing, and we talked about tangents. Where my whole
Yeah.
thing is, like my favorite hypnotherapist is Milton Erickson, and his
Okay.
whole thing was teaching stories.
Okay.
So whether I'm on stage talking, giving a talk, or doing hypnosis, I do a lot of story stuff, and it's all like teaching little things as I'm telling a story. But oh, sorry, where were we on that one?
The app was the
Yeah.
app.
Oh yeah. So okay, so a friend of mine, he had this website doing hypnosis tracks, and I never looked at it because I thought I didn't want to be influenced by what he was doing because maybe I'd do it. He signed up with these guys who are like, these guys are approaching me to do apps instead of just the website. But it's a conflict of interest. Maybe you want to work with them. I don't want to just back out and not give them a referral. Think about it. I'm like, great. So I thought about it, and eventually, I'm trying to speed up the story. I decided, okay, fine. I'll send them a sample and see if it's something they're looking for. Well, one thing led to another. They loved it. We talked. Boom, I'm on board. So I started creating hypnosis content for this company called Mindify. And it was fantastic. They had an idea, and we had this wonderful collaboration of all these different tracks we wanted to do and how we wanted to help people. And that's what we ended up doing. So I created hypnosis content. They made it into an app, and we put it out there on several different platforms.
You know, I'm downloading it the second that I'm done with this podcast.
Right? Yeah, well, there's like 2 apps for sleeping, 2 for weight loss. The one I said, the hypnobirthing. What else do we did so many, quitting smoking, a couple things, law of attraction.
Oh.
Which is, and before I did any kind of app, my thing was, I read a lot. Like, I already knew a lot about these different topics, but I read about like what are people saying about it, whether it's weight loss or sleep or whatever. So it's not, yes, I'm going to talk about, get people to relax, as we talk, relax and release or whatever, gets people into that nice calm state. And then here are some practical things you can do to set up your environment so that when I'm saying, and you're in bed right now, and just relaxing your body, wherever. And
So
I'm saying you've
we're
already
going to go to
done
bed
these
together because I've never gone to bed with anyone I've podcasted. I'm not sure. When you're in a relationship, that's an awkward conversation
Yeah.
to have.
It is strange because I've had people who know me were like, it is kind of weird listening to your voice when, like,
Yeah.
well, be glad it's just going to sleep.
Yeah. That's not the app I want, but okay.
Yeah.
So let's take it back because we could tangent and talk forever. That's what I adore about you. But I didn't realize that what you were doing is NLP. It's always one of those things. You probably mentioned it and I probably didn't catch it or understand I didn't put all those pieces together. And then when I read your email, I was like, oh my God, I forgot, or I didn't realize. So tell me what year you were born and tell me your story about what happened.
All right. Well, I was born in 1970.
Woo, me too. Yeah.
All right. Were you really? All right, great.
Yeah.
The year of the dog.
Yes.
Well, whatever. So yeah, 1970. And speaking of dogs, when I was born, I have an older sister, 4 years older than I am. And so she was 4 when I was born.
Clearly.
And she had a dog. And apparently her dog, was having seizures and throwing up all night on the kitchen floor. And it had never done this before. It was like this weird, like, omen, like it knew what was coming. And my mom was, up for a while and cleaning things up. And early in the morning, her water broke. And she's like, Bob, my dad, I think it's time. Go, get everything ready. And okay, she goes, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. It feels like I have to go. She goes into the bathroom. My dad's out there getting stuff, and she looks down, and there's a purple bluish arm coming out of her. And she gets my dad. My dad's like, oh, freaking out. My sister, they get my sister who's gonna go to the neighbors, and later my sister tells all of her friends, yeah, my brother waved goodbye to me on the way to the house. Like bragging. Yeah. That's,
Oh my God.
Waving goodbye. So then she went to the hospital. They put her in the back of this police car, this police like car, wagon, or whatever it is. My dad follows behind, and in the back of the police car, the wagon, she's looking up at the ceiling, and she's praying to God, saying, "Please let this baby live," because the arm is purple. It looks dire. She said, "If you allow my child to live, I will quit smoking," because she was still smoking during pregnancy. It was 1970, so people were still doing. She wasn't drinking alcohol, but she was smoking cigarettes.
Right.
So she said, "I'll quit, whatever." And then they did a cesarean section, and later they're like, "Would you like to see your little baby boy?" And she's like, "I don't have a baby boy. It died. You're just saying that to make me feel better." And they're like, bring the kid in. So they brought me in, and sure enough, obviously, I was alive, but I had some health problems. I had, some like infant asthma. I had a lot of like bronchitis stuff, and they said I had two heart valves that were leaking, and I had, it's called coarctation of the aorta, where the aortic artery is narrowed. So then, when I was 14 months old, I had heart surgery to repair the coarctation in the aorta, right around Christmas. And when I was just before I turned 6, I had subacute bacterial endocarditis.
Right, which everyone like, oh yes, I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
well, who hasn't
Yes,
had
of
that,
course,
right?
yes.
Rolls right off the tongue. And it's an inflammation of the heart. It's an infection of the heart. And usually you treat it with penicillin, but I was allergic to that. So, and this is some of my earliest memories where I really remember I was in the hospital for 7 weeks. And I really remember a lot of that. And this was
Wow.
1976. So I was alone a lot of the time because visiting hours were fairly limited. So I saw a lot of stuff as a 6-year-old, or almost a 6-year-old. The friends that I made, the time that I spent, that a lot of those kids are not alive anymore. But because they usually treat it with penicillin, they had to come up with a new combination of drugs. And I was the first person they tried it on, and it worked, obviously. So,
Oh, that's good.
yeah,
Phew.
yeah. And
I don't know.
I still have it.
Let's mix
It's
this
awful.
cocktail. Well, you can
Yeah,
blame anything in your life on that.
yeah, right.
Well, I
So,
was a
so
guinea
yeah.
pig.
So I had that, but I still had the valves. And when I graduated from high school, like a week after high school, I was diagnosed with having had a stroke.
Do you
And
remember the stroke? I mean, I know you don't really remember the stroke probably, but do you remember any of that?
I don't remember having the stroke. No, they found the stroke, and then they found an unrelated aneurysm.
Oh
But
my
I don't.
God.
Yeah, I don't remember having the stroke. Although I think it probably happened when I was 6, because at the time,
Oh,
I had 106 temperature for about a week, and then my mom ended up actually diagnosing me because the doctors didn't know what it was, and she looks it up. She's like, doctor, I think he has endocarditis, which in her medical book says usually fatal. She's like, no, that sounds great. But I remember going to the doctor that day, and I've seen this a lot, where the doctor comes in and has that serious look, like, I don't know how to say this, and
yeah.
then it's usually he leaves and then comes back and then doesn't say anything and leaves and comes back. It's happened a lot. And I remember that day of the two adults literally looking up at my mom and the doctor, and seeing that these adults who you put on a pedestal didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I felt awful, and I was complaining of pain in my fingers and my toes. And so I think that there was probably emboli that
Okay.
throwing into my system from my heart, little clots in my heart. And I think that's probably when I had the stroke, because as a 6-year-old, how do you explain
Yeah, exactly.
that?
So you're in high school.
Yep.
How did they find the unrelated aneurysm?
Some vision issues that I had. So they were looking for that, and then they did a CAT scan. And interesting, they're like, we're going to do a CAT scan. And if we find anything, we'll admit you to the hospital, like right next door. Well, okay. So my mom ended up driving me, and I get the CAT scan, and they admit me.
Oh,
Yeah. So
God, how
yeah,
terrifying was all this for
yeah.
you? Were you afraid at 6, or were you just kind of like a
Well,
6-year-old?
I don't ever, that the admitting me with the stroke and then the aneurysm, that was when I was 18. But I wasn't afraid then. I was more curious as to what was happening.
Oh,
And then when I was 6, I don't ever remember being afraid.
good.
In fact, I've asked my mom since, like, what was I like as a kid? And she's like, oh, you're really well behaved, and you love to play, and you're always in your little imagination world, and you wanted to talk about everything, which was what I did because I had a lot of questions
I
about what was
bet.
happening.
So you're 18 and they bring you next door
Yep.
and you find out you have an aneurysm. Was that why you were having issues with your vision?
No, they said, well, they sat me down on bed, so just myself and the neurologist, and he pulls out the CAT scan. Now, I just graduated from high school, and I took an EMT class in high school, emergency medical. So like I knew a lot about the human body because I was interested because I had a lot of stuff wrong, or whatever. Let's say wrong. And so he pulls out the CAT scan, and before he says anything, I go, "Oh, it looks like I had a stroke in my right occipital lobe." And he goes, "Yeah, you did." That's
my
right.
God.
You did have a stroke in your right occipital lobe. And then he showed me this other aneurysm, which was a fairly big aneurysm, according to him, between lobes, kind of on the right side of my brain. And it was the whole, are they going to operate? Are they not going to operate? So they went 4 years and just let it sit there. And then I had it operated on when I was 23, essentially elective brain surgery, where it was an open brain surgery, which they wouldn't do these days, but in 93, that's how they did it.
So you were awake? Is that? Oh, they wouldn't do
open in that.
20.
Now they would use a catheter.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
But back then, they literally had to cut my head open and pull the skull off and blah, blah, blah.
And when you talk about stuff like this, you act like it's no big deal. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, it was interesting because every, especially as an adult, every time I have any kind of a major surgery or even a minor procedure, as they call it, I really make it an event. Like I plan for it. Like before my brain surgery, which I scheduled 3 months, in advance. And, they said, well, there's like I think they said it was like an 8% chance of something going wrong. And if by wrong, it would be very bad. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, so about a week and a half before, I spent a week at our cabin. The first weekend was I had 2 best friends. The first weekend was with my one best friend. The second weekend was with my other best friend. And then the 5 days between was just me up at our cabin, reading and meditating and just reviewing life. So that by the time of my brain surgery, by that day, I was so like jacked on positive feelings that like I'm ready to die. Like I assumed it would go well. I've always been in good health because I've always felt I needed to be. So I always ate well and was active and whatever. But I thought, I am okay to die today if that should happen. I've told everybody everything I needed to say. Spent this great week with my friends. I really come to terms with everything. So I was so excited by life. And this has happened, like I say, for every procedure to the current day, and including my 2 years ago when I had open heart surgery, where it's such a mindful experience where I'm facing, like I call it operating from the heart, where I project like heart energy, love energy outward, because this nurse that I actually walked to the operating room for the brain surgery, which was weird, but this nurse I'm walking with, what if she's one of the last humans I see?
Yeah.
And so everything, so like I was projecting love and attention under her. And I remember being rolled into the operating room, and this is for anything, if I'm able to be aware enough to see it, I look around and go, maybe this is the last room that I'm alive in. And not in a bad way at all. It's like I'm almost giddy with excitement. This like, wow, and like these are the last faces I see in this, like, and I think I put down like in the interview, with an enthusiastic kind of way.
Yeah.
Like for me, I just love that word enthusiasm because it means the God within. It's like you have this, as I call the higher self or the core self within us. And if you're enthusiastic, it's like you are giving yourself permission to release that godlike stuff or quality that's within us and project it outward, whatever we're doing. And it's just, those days are amazing. Like there's just so much, I don't know, the presence about it. They call the word ineffable, I guess, comes to mind, where it's past language that I'm aware of.
Right.
There isn't because of those experiences and other things related to that, there isn't a week that goes by where I don't cry because I'm overwhelmed with how great things are.
What a completely different attitude than most people have, which is what draws
Right.
people to you, because I've met you, and I don't always meet people that I've interviewed.
Right.
I've met you, so I remembered that about you.
Mm.
I think positivity attracts positivity, and it also attracts negativity, because we want to
Yeah.
know, what do you have that I don't have?
Right.
So from 23 with the brain surgery to,
Yeah.
you said 2 years ago, so when you were 45 and had open heart surgery, what happened? You went to college.
So yeah, I went to college. Well, that was interesting because it was an interesting summer because I had the brain surgery, knowing that I'd be going to college in the fall. I was going to go to college for filmmaking.
All
I,
right.
I love the idea of telling stories. Go figure. I just didn't realize it would be in a different way that I'd be using stories. Um, but that summer I wasn't allowed to drive because they said, "Oh, you had a stroke and the whatever, and we're gonna just hold off on driving." So it was a very secluded summer for me, and uh, a kind of depression, I guess, to some degree, in that I really internalized things and I really went even deeper into my mind, into meditation, into trying to understand, like, well, if I had a stroke, and all on top of all the heart stuff I already knew about, and I had a stroke sometime before I was even 18, then what is this whole going to school business?
Mm.
So it's weird because you wouldn't have looked at me and go, he's depressed, because I would have been having fun and positive and laughing. And those things were very valid. It wasn't fake. But I also I didn't think I'd be around very long. Like, okay, I'll do this filmmaking thing, but I don't see myself living past 30. Like, but okay, it'll be fun.
Right.
And so yeah, I went to school and eventually I changed majors from filmmaking, which I continued to do on the side and learn some stuff about filmmaking, and then I pursued psychology, where I learned about hypnosis and the unconscious mind. And yeah, I was under the mistaken impression that getting a degree in liberal arts would like tie all the questions I had. Like,
Oh,
I'll
wow.
learn a little bit about everything, and then it'll somehow tie all together, and I'll leave with some like knowing. Wrong.
Wrong.
Like, you don't learn that, but um, yeah. So
Were there any other surgeries between 23 and 45, or were you doing pretty well?
let's see. Yeah,
Pull out your
it's
spreadsheet.
weird because sometimes I'll forget. It's like, oh, that's right, I had a stroke, or oh, that's right, I forgot about this. Well, every year I've gone in for what usually was a routine cardiology appointment. So I felt great, but I often, unless something was actually happening, and even then sometimes I felt great. Even when I was in the hospital for that, when I just graduated from high school for a week, I felt great.
Okay.
I mean, there was nothing. This thing maybe happened when I was 6. So like they'd be like, "So Mr. Fisher, like, are you okay? Like, do you need help getting to the bathroom?" And I'd be like, I could carry you with me, and I was lifting weights. I was like really fit. I'm like, I could carry you. I could walk on my hands there. So yeah, I'm going to be okay. And yet I'm on this ward where I'm 50, 60 years younger than everybody else on the
Yep.
telemetry ward. And I remember, it's hitting me emotionally right now when I go back to it. It's like, 'cause I remember that guy meaning me, sitting there as an 18-year-old, just wondering about his future, and knowing I was on this ward with people that are so much older. And I remember my grandparents walking by, like, Jonathan, like they walk past my room, like, I'm right here. But one nurse at about 3 in the morning came in to do the vitals and, check my blood pressure and everything. And I don't even know if he knew how awake I was, but this nurse, he said, "You're so damn young."
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, nobody ever acknowledged that. The obvious had never been acknowledged. Like, don't want pity. I don't want, any kind of sympathy, I just want the obvious to be acknowledged so that I'm not in some weird, am I the only one that's noticing this? Acknowledge it so that I don't feel like I'm crazy, and I can then also acknowledge it at some deeper level and then move forward. But I remember that the doctor saying that. And then, I left the hospital with this aneurysm just sitting there, and they said, yeah, you have a 3 to 5% chance of it rupturing every year. And if it ruptures, you die or you have significant issues.
What was the decision to wait 4 years? Why? I guess is a better question.
They had thought I was put on blood thinners. I was put on Coumadin because of the stroke.
Coumadin's got a ton of side effects.
Right. Well, that's and I'm still on it now, so we can talk about that.
Okay, because that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was on Coumadin, but they said, well, the aneurysm had calcified, and they thought maybe that offered some protection. Now, 4 years later, they're like, what we believe about calcified is it actually makes it more fragile, And the fact that you're on Coumadin, if it did rupture, you're dead.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So that's why they said, well, maybe you want to think about having it repaired. And it was an elective surgery, and we did. I talked to a couple of different neurosurgeons. So that was an interesting.
I bet it was.
Process, yeah.
It's so fun to me that you have the health issue. That's one part of the conversation. And then you have the fascination by the health issue was another part of the conversation. Right. And then you have just the humor and the love about it, which is you're like a 3-for-1.
Yeah, right.
You're going to go with that one?
Yeah.
We don't call it multiple personalities. We call
it three things in one.
3-for-1.
Yeah.
So when I met you 9 months ago, it had only been like a year and a half since you'd had open heart. I remember sitting next to you at lunch, and I'm like, tell me about yourself. And we were all like deeply sharing stories, because conferences for a couple of days where we were all very invested.
Right.
So it's kind of like going to summer camp where you get super close, super fast. And we were sitting together, and you told me about that. And I was like, oh, I know that. I was trying not to cry, and all I wanted to do was hug you. You get hugged by women a lot, though. I mean, that's a side effect. That's not bad.
Hey, the burden we have to bear is sometimes more than I can take.
And also it was super.
Do you need a hug? Yes, I think that I do. Yes.
That would help.
Maybe 3 for 1. I hear there's a deal.
And it was really interesting because I remember also you whispered to me that the woman that was sitting across from you and I, because there were like 10 or 11, it was a pretty big lunch, about 10 of us. The woman sitting across from us was your ex of like 4 months who had broken up with you. And I was like, super.
Yeah, that's not okay.
So I should hug you. I mean, I'm in a relationship, but I can play this game. I can be your wingman.
Yeah.
And you told me about your open heart surgery, and I was kind of like, you talked about it like, so I was walking through the mall the other day, and I had open heart surgery, and I saw this backpack, and I'm like, wait a minute, you had open heart surgery.
Yeah.
So what was residual that was occurring in your heart? This is almost 40 years after you were 6.
Right. Well, they knew about the heart valves since I was an infant.
Right.
And they always said, like, probably you'll have to have them like repaired, replaced. They didn't know at the time. By the time you go to high school, then before college, then before you're 30. And I kept thinking, if I play my cards right and I stay healthy, maybe never. Because every year I went to the cardiologist, it was hey, it looks just like last year. Come back in next year. I'm like, all right, great. So going to the cardiologist, and even to this day, going to any hospital, even if it's not for me, it's like a church for me. It's like a sacred space for me. Like, people dread it. I love going there because there's a peace that I get as soon as I walk in. Because I've had so many wonderful experiences leaving there, or even just being there. So many formative presence building experiences where you're there in the moment. Mm-hmm. And it was well, let me go back to the what happened in my 20s and stuff. So 20s, I felt really good. 30s, health-wise, I go in every year for the checkup. Just before I turned 40, I had some heart rhythm issues. So they call it atrial fibrillation, where the heart goes out of rhythm. And it's interesting because you could go where I'd have like boundless energy and then it goes out of rhythm, so that I go from a resting heart rate of maybe like 62 to a resting heart rate of 140.
Good God.
And it makes standing tiring. It makes going up a half a flight of steps tiring, wherein 2 seconds ago when it was in rhythm, that would have been nothing. And so it went out of rhythm a couple of months before I turned 40, and then was out of rhythm for about 6 months until I had another procedure, an 8-hour they call it an ablation, where they go in and they do these little burn things on different nodes of the heart and then shock it back into rhythm. So I had heart rhythm issues off and on from 40, but still I would go in every year and they would say, oh, but the heart still looks the same, and it's still, when it's in rhythm, it's fine. Although sometimes even when it's out of rhythm and I was on Coumadin, so it would prevent stroke, a clot, they would say, oh, well, everything's fine. It's fine that it's out of rhythm because it's controlled. But like, yeah, but I feel awful. It's an awful feeling because it's a constant headache. I'm tired all the time. And it's when at least for me, when my heart is out of rhythm, it's like butterflies all the time. It's like you're nervous or excited, but if you're excited all the time, you're in that, you don't want to be excited all the time. You don't want to be on all the time. And that's what it feels like. If I lean against something, it feels like I'm shaking. It's an awful feeling. And yet my heart was fine. And then I went in January of 2015, and I met my cardiologist, and he's listening and looking at the test. He goes, your lung function is getting worse. I think you should have open heart surgery either this year or next year. And he may have said things after that, but I went somewhere else because my first thought was I failed. I thought if I could eat the right things, meditate the right way, exercise, and have a certain mindset, all these different things, that maybe I could prevent ever having this surgery. And I remember somehow or another, I got to the car, and I got in the car, and I was going to be meeting a friend actually for coffee or whatever. And I remember leaving the parking ramp. I got out into the bright LA sunshine. I was listening to some moving classical music. And it was like my unconscious mind took over. Because my conscious mind was like in this, like you failed, and it was rationalizing why everything I did was just a miserable. And it's like my unconscious mind, my core self, I would say, higher self, saved me in that. All of a sudden I started crying, like so much so I thought I gotta pull over. I don't know if I can see the road. And it was out of joy. I'm like, oh, I've been so lucky. And that's the main thing that always flows through me is, at the time I was 45 or whatever. And I thought, 45 years, that's pretty good. It's been great. I've been really lucky, the things I've been able to see. And it's usually, it's all the little things that crop. It doesn't like, oh, I went to Italy and I saw that. Like, that's nice. But it's all those little things and the people and the relationships and I was so lucky to be born into this family. And it's for me, it's never been those big things. And I was just overwhelmed with how lucky I was. I thought, yeah, I have the surgery, don't have the surgery. It works, it doesn't work. Wow, 45 years.
No kidding.
Great. It was and it was just this joy filled me. And then I arrived at the coffee shop. I'm like, pull yourself together. You're meeting a friend. And that still happens once in a while where I connect to that feeling. And that actually goes back to when I was 6, when I was in the hospital for the 7 weeks. I remember when you're 6, 7 weeks feels like that's a year. I mean, that was a long time as a 6-year-old. 7 weeks. I mean, ugh. And again, I remember every day, but I remember going home and our house seemed like it was in Technicolor because compared to the drab of the hospital. And I remember walking up the driveway to the house and just like I hadn't seen it for it seemed like so long that it looked like it was more colorful and everything like shimmered with energy because I didn't think I'd be back there.
But you've maintained that sense of childlike,
Yeah.
like you said, enthusiasm and
Yep.
joy through everything.
Yeah, that specific feeling and different feelings like that have always been there. This, as I put it, the childlike quality, the playful quality, this seeing the world beneath the world, as I call like seeing beyond the door, seeing beyond the facade, seeing beyond the hypnosis that we're all in, the social hypnosis, the societal hypnosis, and that nobody ever had to tell me, hey, John, you know what's important in life? Yes, I do. Do you know that it's not about having this or achieving that? Yes, I know.
At 6,
Yeah,
what some of us are still struggling with.
yeah. I mean, I remember I would have loved the internet back in the 70s because I remember I had all these questions that at some point my parents couldn't answer. They didn't go to college and they had limited ability to answer these questions that became more and more advanced as I became older. So I had to go to like, B. Dalton bookseller or whatever, like, and find actual books. So I learned meditation. I literally knew no human being that was meditating. And I was looking at meditation books when I was like 11 or 12, reading like Eastern yogi stuff. I knew nothing about this. Nobody that I knew had any interest in this whatsoever. I would sit in my closet and try to meditate and get into these weird states. Like, maybe I'll get some answers here. Maybe I'll get some answers there. Because I had experienced things that I couldn't explain, and everyone else would sort of brush off as, well, he's got a good imagination. Like, well, maybe, but maybe there's more.
Maybe there's more to it. And now, good grief. Now, so the heart surgery went well. We're talking today.
Yeah, so I had the heart surgery 2 years ago where they did replaced 2 valves and they did 5 other things actually to the heart, so that when I went back to the room, one of the nurses, this is at a big hospital in in Los Angeles here, one of the nurses goes, that was the most extensive heart surgery we've done at this hospital.
Oh God.
And I had told her, I'm like, that's so great. They didn't tell me that ahead of time. Like, well, we're pretty sure we can do this surgery. Well, we'll try to squeeze everything in.
Oh God.
But I'm like, oh, good to know now. But and she would say, she was like, in light of that, it's so weird because like the patients are usually complaining all the time. It's like, you don't complain. Not only do you not complain about anything, you're always in a good mood and you're having fun and you're like really welcoming and whatever. I'm like, well, that's the secret. Is project this enthusiasm outward. And it's weird because some people say, oh, you mean like a fake it till you make it? I'm like,
no.
You'll think that, but it's not that, because I believe we're drawing from an inexhaustible, if it is the inner God, we're drawing from that inner stuff that, it's the more you give it away, the more you get. So it's like, it's not faking it till you make it. It's not inauthentic to be overly joyous.
No, and I know from meeting you that it's your enthusiasm for life is, well, it's always part infectious. If we're happy, people want to be around us and they want to be happy. Smiling is kind of contagious.
Right.
But I would have never in a million years said that you weren't totally authentic. It is more because I met you in this enormous group, 80 people or whatever, 100 people, however many people were there.
Yep.
And, I connected with probably 10. I mean, really made a connection that's lasted anything, maybe 5. of those, continue on. It's not at all fake. There's nothing about your enthusiasm and joy that's fake it till you make it at all. And anyone who spends taking a second glance would know that. But it is curious because you think, what is this guy taking? And where can I get some of it? I would think more than that, like, what is going on in your life that I need to know more about this, because I want some of that, I think is more what people would say who use you for coaching.
Right.
Or NLP or anything, anybody who gets to know you, because definitely it's one of those. And that's how our conversation started.
Right.
I know I just wanted to know more. And I think there are people like us that want to know more just organically. That's kind of who you are. But there are people that you're still drawn to. So I love that about you. I appreciate it. Yes, you definitely walk the walk.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for people to get in touch with you, I remember at lunch, like, do you need help to the car after this? When you told me about your surgery, I'm like, oh my God, Jonathan, do you want me to lift your fork?
Right.
But the great thing is that I knew I could be silly with you, and you'd be like,
yes, you
could help me with my fork. I do not need you to do that.
Yeah. Please, do all of that. Say all of that stuff, make all of those jokes and play.
Which is what I love. It was very obvious that you could play well, and we were sitting with a couple other people, pretty playful people too.
Right.
People get in touch with you. Is the easiest thing going to Mythic Heart? Is it .com?
MythicHeart.com. Yep.
Is that the easiest way to get in touch with you?
That is probably the easiest. They could email me as well at jonathan@mythicheart.com, but you could just go there.
Okay.
And on the website, there are some hypnosis tracks. And
awesome. So are we all hypnotized right now just by your voice?
Well, and you're just sitting there listening to my voice.
You listen to
anything different.
And you'll get the same results.
Yeah. Just sit back, relax, or release.
Let go.
That's right.
Let go. Let go is mine. Let go. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us today.
Thank you for having me on. No.
Thank you so much for listening in to Jen Taylor Rerouting. Like, share, and of course, comment. I welcome input with attitude. Get a copy of my book on Amazon, Hello, My Name is Warrior Princess, or check out my website, jentaylor.net. And if you still want more, sign up for one of my coaching packages.